If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand story theory. See how other people have applied the theory and then use it in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. My name is Valerie Francis. I am a writer and a story editor, and I help women who are writing in all genres learn how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
And I'm Melanie Hill, editor, poet, and author of middle grade novel Jet Cooper, and I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
On today's episode, Melanie pitched Erin Brockovich so that we can study constant characters. This 2000 film was directed by Steven Soderbergh from a screenplay by Susanna Grant. Of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. And as always, we would love it if you could help other writers find our show by simply leaving a rating and review. It really does help us out quite a lot, and it helps other authors too. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it's really easy to do. Just go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, click the 5 stars, maybe leave a word or 2. It really is that simple. Okay, Melanie, Erin Brockovich, constant characters, what have you got?
All right, well, my aim this season is to debunk the myth that characters in stories need to have change arcs. Now, because they don't. But that doesn't mean that nothing changes or that nothing happens, quite the opposite. Now, last week I talked about the 2 types of characters and the 3 types of story arcs that were proposed by Anthony Mullins in his book, Beyond the Hero's Journey, a screenwriting guide for when you've got a different story to tell. And he says that characters either change or remain constant, and stories have an optimistic, ambivalent, or pessimistic arc. Erin Brockovich is a constant character, and this story has an optimistic arc. Now, this doesn't mean that characters aren't complex or that they don't have an internal framework. What it does mean is that the internal aspects of their character remain constant when faced with external problems. How they solve problems remains true to the original character that we meet. Now, this season, we're going to track the decisions of the protagonist to demonstrate that their internal beliefs remain constant, and it's the external world these characters live in that change. So let's have a look at Erin Brockovich. In the first sequence of the movie, Erin's character is clearly presented. She is a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Her clothes, her dialect establish her as working class. And this is her external presentation, but it is an external presentation of who she actually is. Her appearance in court shows she has a distrust of authority and the justice system. And her hot temper and explosive nature are on full display in the courtroom. Plus, during that sequence or the next sequence, she demands that Ed, her lawyer, gives her a job, and Ed agrees. So in the first sequence, we see Erin bending the world to suit herself. We also see her take on a Goliath in the courtroom, even though she loses. She is an underdog and she fights for the underdog. This is who she is, and it remains the case and remains constant throughout the movie. But Erin is vulnerable too. She has children to look after, and when she demands a job from Ed, she whispers to him, "Don't make me beg," because she will if she has to. Now, Erin might be a constant character, but she also has character dimension. She's a firebrand, and she is vulnerable. And constant characters don't need to be two-dimensional or wooden, right? They can be interesting in their own right, even though they don't change. Now, identifying change or constant characters takes a bit of practice. What you're looking for is the thinking behind the decisions they make, or the values behind the decisions that they make, and the reactions of the characters around them. So with constant characters, their values or beliefs remain consistent through the story. So for Erin, she fights for the underdog. That's the belief that remains constant. She makes the same decision even when her own children ask her why she has to work so much. She makes the same decision when Ed hires a more experienced law firm, and she makes the same decision when the company needs 90% of the plaintiff's signature for the suit. Erin goes out there and gets what she needs to fight for the town people of Hinckley. However, the characters around Erin change. The ladies in the office treat her with disdain, but by the end, some are helpful and caring towards her. Ed, her boss, is tolerant of her, just at the beginning of the movie, and by the end, he gives her a big office with a huge bonus, and he even changes his tie after she makes a comment about how terrible it is. So he changes in little and big ways. George, Erin's boyfriend, changes his life to support her. He looks after the kids and forgoes his hobbies. And after realizing that Erin won't prioritize their relationship over her work, he leaves her. So again, the characters around Erin change. This keeps the story interesting because stories, as we've said many, many times, are about change and they are about conflict. And there is plenty of change and conflict in Erin Brockovich. Now, this movie has an optimistic story arc, or in other language or other terms, it's called a prescriptive tale. This is an interesting point. The story has an arc, and the direction of the arc depends on the resolution of the conflict from the protagonist's point of view. In the case of Erin Brockovich, the conflict is resolved in her favour. Now, Anthony Mullins points out that Erin mostly wins the challenges that she faces, and this is true. There are a few things that don't go her way, but they aren't big by comparison to the David and Goliath battle that Erin and Ed choose to take on. So how do we tell a story that keeps a reader engaged if the character overcomes most of the challenges? So it's the size of Erin's battle that is massive. So we ask the question, how does a single mother with no job end up making a $1 billion corporation pay for the damages it did to innocent people? So it's the how that keeps us engaged. And there's a key factor with the how. All through the movie, Ed and Erin are missing one vital piece of information to get the win. They need proof that the PG&E Corporation were aware of the contamination in Hinckley's soil and water, and that nothing was done even though they knew about it. Without this proof, their case against the corporation isn't as solid as they'd like. And that is a key factor that keeps us interested throughout the movie, right? It's that, will they get it? Will they not get it? So it's mystery in terms of narrative drive. So while Erin doesn't change, the central dramatic question, how does Erin do it? And the stakes, which is the lives of the town people of Hinckley, make this movie compelling. The impact Erin has on the world around her is fascinating to watch. Now, one of the things I find myself doing when I'm studying for the podcast is that I like asking myself if I can see how the story theory applies in real life. And I think that this is important to recognize what we see in stories in the real world. Now, of course, this isn't always literal, but I think it's important that we see truth in the stories that we tell. And there are many people that I know who face a challenge by bending the world to suit their needs. And this can be good and bad, of course. But a takeaway here is that a constant character isn't just for stories. They exist, and if you'd like to write a story with a constant character, then look around you at the people you know for inspiration. All right, Valerie, that's what I got from constant characters. How did you go this week?
All right. Well, this season I am studying the speech in praise of the villain. Okay. Now, there's a whole lot of flexibility with this. I mean, you really can adapt it to fit whatever kind of story that you're writing. It could be a formal speech, like in a monologue situation. It could be just one line, like I think in the movie Alien, it's just one quick line. It could be presented by one character, or it could be presented by multiple characters. Whatever you need it to do in your story, it can do. Now, the idea behind the speech in praise of the villain and why it's so important is that your audience or your reader needs to understand that the villain or the antagonist is formidable. They are somehow smarter, faster, stronger, more powerful than your protagonist, somehow greater than your protagonist. And that applies no matter what type of protagonist you're using. In terms of its overall story structure, Melanie, I think you just said this, but I've got it in my notes as well. In terms of its overall story structure, Erin Brockovich is standard. There's no curveballs here. It's I'm trying to think of the baseball term. It's right down the middle. Is that the baseball term? There's not. My apologies to the baseball listeners. There's nothing here that is unusual or weird or head scratching or innovative. Frankly, it's a great film to study if you want to understand what the classic story structure is. Erin is the heroine, or the hero, the main character. And because the writers, the storytellers, need to drive home the point that Erin is the epitome of an underdog, they are constantly highlighting her lack of education, her lack of money, the fact that she doesn't have a job and can't get a job, that childcare is an issue, and the list goes on and on and on. Nothing works out for Erin. Everything is a constant struggle. There are many antagonists. When I say nothing works out for Erin, what I mean is there's many, many, many antagonists, but just as Melanie said, she overcomes them all. So it does work out for her in the end, but it's just coming at her from every direction. And that makes logical sense when you think of an underdog as a protagonist, because that's what makes them an underdog, right? But of all of the forces of antagonism in this story, PG&E, which is the Pacific Gas and Electric Utility Company, PG&E is the primary antagonist or the primary villain, so that's who I'm going to focus on. All right. In this movie, there are no less than five speeches in praise of the villain. And they come from multiple characters. So why then would the storytellers, the writers, have chosen to use 5 speeches in praise of the villain? Well, again, if you think about it, it makes logical sense. You've got an underdog for a protagonist. So the way to really drive this home and make Erin's ultimate win really, really sing and really create a sense of catharsis in the audience, what they are doing throughout the whole movie is constantly reminding us how much Erin doesn't have and all of the things that she's up against, while constantly reminding us how much the company does have. Like, all the advantages are in the PG&E column. All the disadvantages are in the Erin Brockovich column. And they remind us of this over and over and over and over. And just in case we didn't get it, they have Ed and Erin talking about David and Goliath, just in case we were sleeping or we decided to look at our phones and turn away from the screen. They're really like hitting us over the head with this. This is as Hollywood a film as it gets. Okay, so what are these 5 speeches in praise of the villain? Well, and by the way, they're sprinkled throughout the whole film. They don't come all in one big clump. So the first one comes at about 29 minutes in, and it comes from Donna Jensen, who is, I call her plaintiff number 1. She is the homeowner who doesn't want to sell her home to PG&E because she doesn't think they're giving her, one, she doesn't think they're giving her a fair value, but 2, she is sick and she doesn't know if she has it in her. And if she is going to go through the whole upheaval in her life of moving house, she wants to make sure it's worth her while. Because, as Erin said, she just got new kitchen cabinets and she's pretty proud of them. So she's comfortable where she is. And when we meet her, she has not made any connection between the health issues that she and her husband have and the location of where she lives. Okay, so at around 29 minutes in, Erin has gone to Donna's house because she doesn't understand what's in the file. She doesn't know why there are medical records in a file that, as far as she has been told, is a real estate case. So when Erin visits Donna, here's what Donna says, quote, PG&E paid for the doctor's visit, paid for a checkup for the whole family. And not like with insurance where you pay and a year goes by and maybe you see some money. They just took care of it just like that. We never saw a bill. So here Donna is praising PG&E and see how easy it is they're making it, how generous they are, how kindly they are treating us. Okay? Because in her mind, it is kindness at that point in the story. Now then, at around 50 minutes in, we see the PG&E lawyer, the first PG&E lawyer, who looks like he might be 20. And the costume design is brilliant because they actually have him in a suit that's too big. So it actually looks like he's wearing his dad's suit. Very well done. Just by the by, when we see the PG&E lawyers later at the conference table, we have Erin and Ed on one side of the table and 2 other of the employees from the law firm. And then we have the 3 PG&E lawyers on the other side. Erin is in full sunlight. And in fact, she's sitting in front of a window and the light coming in from the window, she almost has a halo effect around her because the sunlight is lighting up her hair. When the camera turns to the PG&E lawyers on the other side of the table, they're in shadow. Okay, so these are tools in the filmmaker's toolbox, and of course they're using them. Of course they are. I would use lighting and cinematography and costume design. I'd use all that too if I had it. But as novelists, we don't. We have black text on a white page. I mean, that's it, baby. That's all we got. Anyway, 50 minutes in-ish. This is after Ed has notified the Hinckley branch of PG&E that they know what's going on over there and they have some proof. This is when he has faxed that whole big document over. Here's what the PG&E lawyer says, quote, PG&E is willing to offer the Jensens $250,000 for their home. In terms of land value out in Hinckley, we feel that's a more than fair price. Mr. Masry, before you go off on some crusade, you might want to remember who it is you're dealing with here. PG&E is a $28 billion corporation. So Donna told us how nice they were. This lawyer is telling us how powerful they are. So we're starting to get, even though PG&E corporate and the CEO and the head honchos, they never appear on screen. They only appear on screen through their lawyers. We're still understanding who they are, and we're seeing it from multiple perspectives, right? From the employee's family, now from a lawyer's perspective. Then as the story progresses, the legal case gets going. So now we have Ed and Erin's point of view on PG&E. So at an hour and 4 minutes in, Ed says, they're a huge corporation. They could bury us in paperwork for the next 15 years. I'm just a guy with a small private firm. Erin says, kind of like David and what's his name? Ed replies, kind of like David and what's his name's whole family. So, like I said, in case we somehow missed it, the other 50 times we were told that Erin and now Ed are just little guys and PG&E is this huge, big company, they're now giving us the David and Goliath reference. At an hour and 42 minutes in, this is when we meet the three corporate lawyers who are now like the real grown-up lawyers who have beautifully tailored suits and all that kind of stuff. At an hour and 42 minutes, Erin and Ed are looking at the lawyers in the conference room. And Erin says to Ed, they look like the Secret Service. So this tells us how smart they are and how fearless they are. So not only are they kind, seemingly, not only are they extremely wealthy, but they are fearless and they're smart. So see how we're getting this view of the villain who never appears on screen, but the pieces of the puzzle are I want to say giving us a multidimensional view, but I don't mean dimensional in terms of character dimension. I just mean a more 3D version, I guess, of this character who never actually shows up on screen. And finally, the last one comes at an hour and 35 minutes in. So actually, it's a little, it's actually before the one that Erin says. Ed says, if we went to trial, PG&E could stretch this over 10 years with appeal after appeal. So they're powerful in the community. They're also powerful in the judicial system. So their tentacles really reach. So I found that really interesting because I've watched this movie, I don't know, a dozen times or more. And when you finish the movie, you have total catharsis because not only did the victims win, but Erin has won, Ed has won. It's a real Hollywood ending where everyone is happy and rich and well-dressed and have great hair and all that kind of stuff. But I never really paid attention to how often we were reminded over and over and over that Erin is an underdog and she's up against all of these obstacles. And the villain, the antagonist, PG&E, is so much more powerful and such a formidable opponent in many different areas. Anyway, okay, so that's what I have to say about Speech in Praise of the Villain in Erin Brockovich. Melanie, final thoughts.
All right. Well, my final thoughts on this episode is that Erin Brockovich uses classic story form, right? There is a single character with one main plot line. And the story is about one thing, which is great. But using a constant character provides the writers with an opportunity to demonstrate that inner beliefs and staying the course are essential for big battles. So in this movie, they created a resilient character with unwavering fortitude. So always think about the writing advice you're given and make sure that it will serve your story. And that writing advice is not just some made-up thing that's passed around and believed to be conventional wisdom, because there are plenty of examples out there where whatever you're told, like your character must change, it doesn't hold true. And good writers know that, and they know that sometimes you need a constant character. And to write a constant character, there still needs to be change, and it's the world that changes. So that's my final thoughts for this week.
All right, well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss Invitation to a Murder. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. For the power to write a best-selling story, please visit storynerd.ca/courses. And to join my inner circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. For more information about Melanie's books, visit melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.